Hello everyone, this is part 28 of What If Naruto Had a Secret, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Curiosity, it was said, K the cat. It had been a favorite saying of the orphanage workers to caution the curious children. It worked majority of the time, except on the most curious. Uzumaki Naruto could be counted chief among them. No matter how often he got hurt, he came back even more curious. Curiosity may have K the cat, but satisfaction had brought him back. That described Naruto perfectly, then and now. It was one of his defining traits, the reason why he could learn under Anko. His curiosity kept bringing him back to her, kept forcing him to try and figure it out until he had it. His need to know was unquenchable, and this was why, instead of doing as other teens might and seek out others, he had isolated himself. Because he was curious about the K's no Yaiba and his own, self-created move Kamikaze no Yaiba. He had been using it for a while without really thinking about it, but after the last few hours training he had realized it was a devastating move. He wasn't sure how the ranking system worked, but he placed it as A rank and not something to use around allies. After that, he had tried forming a traditional sword of wind, but that sadly had failed, but a spear had worked. Which had led to brief efforts of experimenting with the futon, ditopper, that had resulted in the creation of a brief shield of wind and a whirlwind under his feet to aid his jumps. It was amazing what he was discovering, and how much chakra he was using up, yet with each discovery he filled up just a bit more of the battered scroll he was using. The scroll, which had been discarded by the original owner years ago, was nothing special. It was merely a scroll Naruto had retrieved in his magpie-like tendencies and the first thing he had grabbed before setting out to train. It was the reason he had the scroll that made it special. Ever since learning the Rasengan, Naruto had been thinking about family. Hence, the scroll. Every technique he came up with, he wrote down, all on the off chance that he ever had a family. It was, in essence, his way of creating a heritage for any possible children, so that, if he did they would not be without a family history. They would have something of his and not have to suffer or struggle like he had. Pulling the scroll into his lap and picking up the pen nearby, he paused, scanning the list of jutsu so far listed and described. Rasengan, Kage Bunshin, his version, which Jiraiya said was different than everyone else's, no jutsu, and how to do the variations, K's no Yaiba, Kamikaze no Yaiba, Futon, Ditopper, K's no Yari, K's Toku, and the few seals that he had learned from Jiraiya. Jotting down a few minor notes on the K's Toku, he sighed, then looked up at the sky. It was about lunchtime, and Anko had told him that morning to make sure and be at the Hokage's office at noon. Something about an important mission Anko had arranged for him, probably as a reward for bringing back those scrolls of Zabuza's that dealt with unity. Shrugging, he finished his notes and then, closing the scroll, stretched before grabbing his Chunin vest. As happy as he was to be a Chunin, he was not thrilled with the vest. Sadly, since his last remaining jacket had finally fallen apart after the Zabuza fight and the store that had sold them was destroyed by Unity, he was forced to improvise. One dark blue, mid-length sleeved shirt sporting a Konoha symbol, orange pants, and a Chunin vest later, he had a new temporary outfit. Slipping the scroll into one of the pouches of the vest, he set off at a brisk pace toward the village. Maybe if he had time, he'd see if Ino would like to get some lunch, but probably not. The girl was probably busy twirling her sword around, trying to catch up on lost training time. Which meant Naruto would just have to bug Anko, who had finally forgiven him for his prank, or Iruka. He'd bug Shino, but the boy was already bugged enough. Chuckling at his private joke, Naruto picked up the pace, idly wondering what mission he and Anko would be handling. Yamanaka Ino felt good, because after so much time, she was finally able to practice her kenjutsu in peace. Of course, her elbow was still a tad stiff, but the more she moved her arm, the looser it became. Turning her body, she performed a low sweep of her kodaki, then curved it back up sharply. Her body flowed from stance to stance, guided by her own unconscious rhythm. Heiatsu now Ino's style had no formal forms, it was created as the user moved. Spontaneous, like actual combat, unpredictable, like any life or death situation. To Ino, it felt like she was dancing to some invisible tune, and her body moved as if that was true. Actually, if any male were present to see her form, they would have an at some of her moves. Coming to a stop, with one last graceful S, she twirled her kodaki and then returned it to the sheath strapped to her back. It had taken her a while to get the desired alterations, but now the sheath was hidden within the purple fabric. Tsukiha was even better than she could have imagined. Perfectly balanced, the blade gleamed almost unnaturally, and her chakra could flow effortlessly through the metal. It wasn't a weapon so much as it was a part of her, and finally being able to wield it had made her realize that she had been missing a part of her. Yamanaka Ino knew beyond a doubt that Kenjutsu was her future. Smiling in self-satisfaction, she left the training field and moved back to the streets, thinking briefly of hanging out with Sakura or checking up on Shikamaru. After all, she and the shadow user had been friends when they had been growing up, but her plans were derailed by two individuals. One was a girl her own age whose name escaped Ino at the moment, and the other was a boy younger than her. Ino knew that the girl was another fangirl. The boy was a new one, though, but she had a feeling she'd find out what he was up to in a minute, unless she fled quickly. Sadly, Ino was too slow and both reached her at the same time. Yamanaka Ino, right? The girl asked cautiously. Yeah, I'm Kase Yaraman. We took the same flower arrangement course, remember? Right, Ino said slowly, blinking at her name. Yaraman's parents must really have hated her, as if Kase wasn't bad enough. I'm Kase Gay, the boy said excitedly. Ino paused, stared at him, then decided that if Yaraman's parents hated her, they downright loathed Gay. Kami, what kind of parents named their children that sort of thing? In comparison to those names, Ino suddenly didn't seem like that bad a name. So, anyway, Yaraman said quickly, a grin on her face. You're on the same team as Uzumaki Naruto, right? Yeah, Ino drawled cautiously, knowing that some of the fangirls could get vicious. Your friends, right? Gay asked quickly. Yeah. Yaraman hesitated, then lowered her voice, leaning in. Is it true that he's really huge? Ino blinked, then blushed a bright red as the girl's meaning registered. Hell, Ino didn't even want to know how or where the girl had heard that. Honestly, was she trying to live up to her name? I don't know. Never mind that, Gay interjected impatiently. What's his favorite food? Where does he get his orange jumpsuits? Is he a good K? Yaraman asked excitedly. I don't. Can he really do the Rasengan? Gay added hopefully. I guess. Is he dating anyone? Yaraman asked a little too forcefully to be casual. Ino couldn't help but rub her temples, and bite back her groan of frustration. Kami, why did it have to be her? Why couldn't Shino or Anko have to deal with this sort of thing? Does he prefer tempered steel kunai or iron kunai? Steel, duh. Ino said with a roll of her eyes, I mean, do you enjoy having to resharpen every last one of your knives every single night? What kind of girl does he like? Spotting more girls and boys hurriedly approaching, Ino actually whimpered. It was amazing to think that such a comfy-looking chair could be so uncomfortable. Shifting slightly, the masked Hokage let out an inaudible sigh. To his right, arms crossed, was the current Anbu commander, Tenzu. To his left, surprisingly enough, was the current leader of Root, Danzu. Sometimes it just didn't pay to get out of bed, Kakashi mused, closing his eye. As if he wasn't tested enough just being Hokage, Kakashi now had 3 difficult tasks before him. One was restraining himself from Kei the discovered just that morning leader of Unity, Danzu. Because Root was loyal to the Warhawk before all others, Konoha needed Root, and Kei Danzu would result in a loss of their specialized skills. Then there was the fact this same Warhawk had managed to convince the council into pressing Kakashi, who had still yet to gain full authority, into assigning the 2 missions on his desk. One was a simple B-rank mission, and the other was, well, it was a mission Kakashi wished he could assign Anko instead of Naruto. Sadly, the choice wasn't his, but in another week he'd be free to assign high-ranked missions as he, not the council, saw fit. Why had the Nadaime signed that law requiring a period of limited authority after a Hokage assumed office? Hadn't the man realized that he was, for 2 weeks, putting the Hokage under the thumb of the politicians? Hearing the door open, he opened his eye and focused on the woman in the brown trench coat and miniskirt, then looked at the blonde in the tunin vest. Kakashi blinked, then reached up to rub at his eye. No, it wasn't an illusion, Naruto was actually wearing something normal. Marveling at the wonders before him, he waited for the door to close and the two ninja to stop in front of his desk. Taking a breath, he beamed at him, or, more correctly, his eye curved up happily. Afternoon. Hi. Yo. Kakashi chuckled to himself, then leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. Well, I suppose I should just get on with this, eh? Selecting the first scroll, he tossed it to Anko, who caught it easily. There you go, one rank B mission. Gonna have fun tonight, Anko muttered with a grin as she unsealed the scroll to check the details. Ooh, this really will be fun. Oi. So, what's the mission? A high-ranking governor named Genji Bokai has recently been discovered selling Hai no Kuni secrets. We're not sure to whom, so the important thing is to stop the sales and find out which country is buying, Kakashi explained for the still-reading Kanoiki. It's rank B because Bokai has also enlisted the help of one Tuji Mizuki. He was being held in Hyotoshi but recently disappeared. Now, however, he's acting as a bodyguard for Bokai's courier. Mizuki, Naruto repeated blankly, before growling dangerously. I thought that bastard was S. Well, he's not, and, as a former Konoha Chunin, he is ideally suited for the job, since he has knowledge of our patrol system. But that's not your mission, Kakashi said, before tossing him the other scroll. This is. Don't open the scroll just yet. I need to explain a few details first, Kakashi said hurriedly as the boy moved to open it. Standing, he moved away from his chair and stared out the window over the village. This mission is not one I would have assigned you. However, due to your sensei's request, those of some members on the council, and a certain law before I gain total command, I am forced to assign you the mission. Oi, so what is it? An A rank, solo mission, Kakashi said calmly, turning back to the stunned-looking boy. This mission is very important to Konoha and the country. While Team Anko will be taking care of Mizuki, the courier, and the buyer, we need you to take care of Bokai. Wait, Naruto repeated blankly. You want me to K one of our people? He stopped being one of our people, Kakashi said firmly without breaking eye contact, the minute he started selling our secrets to enemy nations. He's endangering the entire country and everyone within Konoha, along with running operations that are against every moral code imaginable. He has to be neutralized. But why me? Naruto asked, sounding more leery than upset. The why isn't important, Kakashi said firmly, forcing his voice to be level and not to glance at the ever-paranoid Danzu. It's your mission. Do you accept or not? If I don't do this, Naruto said angrily, glaring at him. What? I get sent to that Hyotoshi place? Or do I have to worry about someone coming to K me? Neither, Kakashi said, eye narrowing. I promise you that, if you decide to refuse, I will not allow either to befall you. It merely means we reassign the mission and you join Anko and the others. Naruto stiffened, then glared at the scroll in his hands. Kakashi wondered which way the boy would go, acceptance or refusal. Go with his team to stop an equally dangerous threat to Hai no Kuni or go on his own to stop the source. In the minutes it took for Naruto to stare at the scroll he was holding, Kakashi wondered which one he wanted Naruto to take. I'll do it, Naruto said, looking up, eyes hard. Very well. Dismissed, Kakashi said curtly, noting the Anko-like coldness in Naruto's tone. Naruto nodded, then, not glancing at Anko, rounded on his heel and stormed out of the office. Anko followed, a small scowl on her face. Kakashi, however, sat back down and stared at the now closed door, realizing that the Naruto that had just left was the same one from Fushimi. The boy that had just left his office had been a ninja trained especially for A. Glancing at Tenzu, he noted the slight alarm on his face. Kakashi, however, turned his gaze away into the battered red book sitting beside the white and red hat. He had just assigned a forced loyalty test on the most loyal person he had ever met. For some reason, he just couldn't bring himself to read his Ika book. Storming out of the Hokage Tower, coke billowing ominously, Mitarashi Anko paused in the street. Looking around, she frowned even more, then raised an eyebrow, wondering where the hell that runt had gotten to. A moment later, she spotted him, standing at the end of the street, leaning against a wall and glaring at the Hokage mountain. Walking quickly, she reached his side and crossed her arms. So. Anko looked over at him and raised an eyebrow, disturbed by his intent gaze. She wasn't used to seeing it, but she knew that look. It was her look, right before she went after an A, and, for some reason, she wasn't comfortable with it on his face. Why the hell do they want me to do this? Naruto finally asked in annoyance. This one. Most likely it's a loyalty test, Anko supplied casually. A loyalty test? What the hell is that about? Every Chunin or above gets one. Part of the confirmation of rank, Anko said with a shrug. Usually, though, they're only given after some event that brings them into doubt. Well, why the hell are they giving me one? They probably wanna make sure beyond a doubt that you're loyal, cause you defeated that Gaara punk. Still, it's not that strange, Naruto. I've had 20. And, Kakashi, even he had 2. Huh. Naruto blinked looking at her. Why? I mean, well, yeah, stupid as it is, I get why they made you do some. 20 is pushing it, though. But, why him? Wasn't he, like, Anbu commander, and now he's Hokage? He's gotta be loyal. First one was entirely political, Anko explained sourly, nodding for him to walk with her. See, he's got a Sharingan, but he's not an Uchiha. Well, one of his teammates was an Uchiha, and, when they gave it to him. But, the Uchiha weren't happy with that story. Called his loyalty into question. That's stupid. Maybe, Anko allowed, picking up the pace. But his team was made up of geniuses, the next set of Sannin, from what I remember. So, yeah, he had a loyalty test for that. Okay, so the other one. Bit more complicated, but it involves his other teammate, Rin. She was a semi-legendary medic by the time this happened, but she was caught performing some heavily forbidden medical experiments. What kind? No clue. At the time, I didn't care much about other people. Anko shrugged. Anyway, Kakashi was found with her, but he claimed that he was there to stop her. Rin was arrested and made to live out the rest of her life in the maximum security level of Hyotoshi, a level that has things even Oro-sensei would be leery of. Hell, he created a few of them, too. Holy crap, Naruto said with a whistle. Okay, so I can understand the reason for that loyalty test. Yeah, it was pretty suspicious, Anko agreed, grinning. Anyway, it's not so strange, is it? No, Naruto allowed before snorting. So, why'd you ask for Kakashi to give me this mission? I didn't. Well, not this one exactly, but same thing, Anko allowed, waving her hand dismissively. Anyway, I wanted to do something special for Ya, since you got the promotion. So, I got you the mission, as my version of a Kaken. Kaken? Really? Naruto asked startled. Wow. Well, thanks, I guess. You're welcome. Oi. So, you wanna help me out on how to freaking do this? I mean, we never covered a tactics. Good point. Okay, keep in mind, this is just a crash course, Anko said briskly as they moved to the rooftops. Typically, you'll have 2 methods of entering a building, a door or a window. Sometimes, there's a secret passage, so you can use that, too, and they can see out a lot of crap if you can. Right. Door, window, secret passage. Exactly. Now, if you use a door, don't enter immediately. Go to the side with the handle. Why? That's obvious, so when you open it, you can peek inside. Don't wanna get K without checking. Now, if you use a window, be casual. Stand beside it, then see if it'll open or not. If it does, then you climb in and crouch to see if anyone heard or noticed you. Right, Naruto said with a sharp nod. Now, those secret passages, apply everything from the windows and doors to them. Sometimes they can be traps, okay. So, there's one last way of getting in, and it's kinda cool. Basically, you have the guards open the doors for you. Huh, how do I manage that? Simple. Just get behind him without his noticing. Then follow him, staying out of his line of sight and not making any noise. When you're as far as you need to be, you take him out and then go on. Also keep in mind that you have to study the guards and the city itself. You can't go blindly charging around, have to be done carefully. Unless you're ordered otherwise, of course. Check. Good. Now, then, more important things to keep in mind, Anko said with a pleased grin. Keep chakra use to a minimum, especially if you ever do this sort of mission out of country. I think you'll be fine. Bokai shouldn't have anything more than tunin if any, and very few can sense careful chakra use. Stick with the basics, water walking and tree climbing, shunshin, and meskai. They don't produce an amount of chakra that someone other than a jonin would notice. Okay, I got all that, but, oi, what do I do once I'm inside? I'm getting there, Anko said, happy to see him so eager to learn. Performing a fancy flip, she landed gracefully on top of a building and turned to look at the blonde at her side. After you've checked things out in the city, come up with an escape route before going in, cause, once you're done or something goes wrong, you're gonna wanna get out of there fast. Got it, Naruto said, doing his own acrobatic move. Escape route for a fast getaway. Anyway, once you're inside the walls, find a safe point that can't be found easily, where you can rest or regroup if you need to. After that, move on. Stay away from places like barracks or dining halls and crap. If anyone sees you, they have to be taken out. On that last part, Naruto groused, good-naturedly. Yeah, well, I know you, runt. Anko retorted with a roll of her eye, then turned serious. Now, as for the actual you're going to have a small time frame to do it and get out. So, no cage bunshin, in case you have to improvise. Also, you generally only have one shot, so go for the immediate K and keep his mouth covered. Oi, immediate K. Yeah, you have several basic and fast ways to pick from, Anko explained, ticking off each K on a finger. S. Naruto was silent, gaze intent, then he looked down. Which one would you suggest? Avoid C his T unless you're behind him. The B sprays out, and the jugular is the same. The heart can be tricky, but it's a safe target. The kidney is safe, too, but it can be hard to hit if you're in a hurry. The eye is iffy if you don't remember to not angle down. The temple is good, but any moron can K by shoving a knife through. But, which one do you reckon? Naruto, this is your A. You pick whichever one you feel comfortable with using. Most first-timers go for the heart or the temple. Some go for the eye. Anko put a hand on his shoulder, face serious. The important thing is this, completing the mission and coming back in one piece. Loyalty test or not, this is still your kaken in my book. So, make me proud, nay. Oi. Don't worry about me, Nichan, Naruto said, giving her a confident smirk. I'm the next Hokage, remember. Then, before Naruto's words registered, he disappeared in a shunshin. Blinking, Anko stood there for another minute, then smirked, shaking her head. Yeah, I remember. Crouching in the shadows of the east gate, Aberrane Shino nodded dutifully to Kekio. It was bit worrying, actually, how dominant she was becoming. The other Kikai barely spoke anymore unless he addressed them specifically. Still, Shino found that he did enjoy talking with her more than the others. No, Kekio-chan, I don't know where she went. Just that she went after Ino, Shino said softly, allowing his gaze to drift to the few ninja around. They were going about the normal business, completely unconcerned that he was talking to a bug. After all, he was an Aberrane, and all Aberrane spoke to bugs. Shino, however, knew better. Oh, his family might talk to bugs, and the bugs might say things back, but they didn't have conversations. Shino did, with Kekio and the others, he held whole conversations about everything. He had bugs that were like his friends, and Kekio was, well, he wasn't sure, but he knew he liked her more than the others. Spotting Anko, who was grinning, and Ino, who was scowling, Shino stood up to greet them. Ino snorted, meeting his gaze for a moment before looking away. Anko produced a carton of dango from somewhere and began munching as she stared at them. After a moment, one of his bugs noted that she was exuding the pheromones of excitement, which, according to his family, was frighteningly close to mating pheromones. Shino noted the gleam in her eye and knew that something was going on that she approved of. Anko-sensei, what is it that has you so excited? Why you talk bout? Anko mumbled through a mouthful of dango, glaring at him curiously. Your pheromones, my Kikaichu can smell it. They say you're excited about something, Shino explained, arching an eyebrow. Oh, Anko said in understanding, a grin spreading across her face. We got a B-rank mission. Pretty standard fare, actually. Basically, there's a governor who's decided to sell info to our enemies. So, what are we supposed to do? Ino asked apprehensively. Trail the messenger and his bodyguard, Mizuki, find out who the buyer is, exactly. Then, neutralize them. Where are they headed? Shino asked, turning toward the gates. They're heading sorta northeast and are about a day ahead of us. I know that with Mizuki, they can avoid most of the patrols, but I'm pretty sure they'll have to go slow till they're further out. Well, we'll have to get Naruto-kun, Ino said, frowning slightly. Nah, he's already out on a mission, Anko said waving a hand, then, seeing their looks, smirked. He's got an A-rank solo A. He got out of here about 2 hours ago. No time to waste and all that. Wait, what? Ino shouted, eyes wide. He's got A. But why? His kaken, Anko supplied with a roll of her eyes. Focus. We've got a mission, and we need to get our moving. So, let's go. Shino nodded, then, as the older woman turned and darted out of the gates, he glanced at a stunned Ino. He will be fine. I doubt anything short of another child like Gaara could prove much trouble for him. I guess you're right, I'm just worried, Ino admitted, joining him in chasing after Anko. I mean, this is a big mission. Solo A, do you really think he can do it? Yes, Shino admitted without hesitation. I believe that Naruto can destroy his heart at will. I see no reason why he would ever have trouble with taking a life. You're scared of him, Ino said in surprise. No, I am just aware. He could, at any moment, turn on us, if he decided he needed to, Shino admitted with a slight nod. Unlike us, I believe he has that coldness within him. You're wrong, Ino said firmly. Naruto-kun might have the coldness inside him, but he wouldn't turn on us so easily. We're his friends. You are his friend, Shino said, turning to meet her gaze. I am his teammate. I see the truth much more clearly than you can. You're wrong, Ino insisted heatedly. Trust me, you're wrong. Shino sighed, then shook his head and sped up. Sometimes, it was pointless to argue with those who willingly blinded themselves. Kakashi might have been right about emotions being an asset, but so had his father. Emotions could cloud your judgment, and Ino was a prime example. Naruto was not the fastest ninja in the world. Even with the Shunshin he was not the fastest. That was not to say he wasn't fast, just that he wasn't the fastest. Case in point, he had already covered a great deal of ground, and, according the Anbu he bumped into a few hours ago, he'd be at Keikyoku by midnight. Since it was already getting close to sunset, he had decided to eat a late lunch and study the mission scroll. It listed several important items: the number of samurai Bokai had at his command, 10,000, the number that would be stationed at Bokai's capital Keikyoku, 2,000, the number of expected ninja, 0, a layout of Bokai's castle, both inner and outer palaces, along with the trick passages and the real one, and the patrol route the samurai made and the time between patrols. Naruto was actually a little frightened by how detailed the scroll was. His more cautious inner voice, which sounded like Anko, told him that there was no way they could gather this much information in such a short amount of time. The part of his mind that spoke like Naruto agreed with that assessment and filed away the knowledge that they were routinely gathering information on their own people. Still, there was no information on the city itself, outside of the standard layout and a comment about only one entrance. Which meant he would have to figure out how to slip through unnoticed, but that could wait till he was there. Resealing the scroll, Naruto stood and, with groan, set off once more. Racing through the forest, knowing better than to take the road, Naruto felt his excitement growing. This was his first solo mission, it was rank A, and it was his kaken. He'd never expected to have a coming-of-age ceremony, though he supposed this technically wasn't one by normal standards. Not that Naruto cared about normal, all that mattered was that he had someone who cared enough to give him a kaken. He also felt a gnawing sense of unease because this was not just a kaken. This was a very serious mission, with very serious results if he failed. He had to trust someone he had never met, which was proving difficult to wrap his mind around. It wasn't the concept of K, Naruto had grown used to that. It was the fact that, this time, he would be K someone who was not actively seeking to K him. There would be no way to hide behind self-defense. All Naruto could use to soothe his conscience, battered creature that it was that he trusted his orders. That this man really did have to now, in order to protect thousands more. So, could he actually do this? take a life in cold B? The answer was, without hesitation, yes. Naruto could not only K like that, he would. For Konoha, for Hai no Kuni, for all the people who were counting on him to ensure this man never sold another secret. Absently, he wondered how Anko and the others were doing. They had, after all, an equally important mission. Mizuki was a pushover, no doubt, but whoever the buyer was would probably be a lot stronger. Still, he couldn't bring himself to worry. After all, Anko was with them. Plus, it wasn't like the others were weak. He had no reason to worry about them. Actually, he felt a tad worried for whomever was unlucky enough to face his team. Chuckling, he picked up the pace as the sun finally set completely. Anko was not known for her patience with people, nor was she known for her understanding. So, it could be said she was doing an admirable job of faking both at the moment. Shino and Ino were trying, she kept telling herself. They weren't Naruto, they didn't have his stamina, but they were pushing themselves. They were trying. That was something. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw Ino's eyes fluttering, then snap open, staving off sleep for a few more minutes. Neither had asked for a break yet, understanding the urgency of this mission. Still, it was tricky. They had to get close enough to track them, while not giving away the presence. Hence the traveling through the night and into the beginnings of daybreak. Still, if she kept this up, they would be in no condition to finish the mission. Plus, Mizuki would know his chances of getting through the patrols with a courier would be better at night. Silently cursing both to an early grave, she motioned for them to stop. What's going on? Ino asked, her voice doubtful. We lose them. Nah, just decided we'll rest here for a while, Anko said, glancing at the two. With a civilian courier, they can't move very fast during the day with all the patrols. Since we need to know which country is buying their information, we can't risk K them just yet. We could capture and interrogate, Shino supplied. Doubtful, Anko said lightly as she sat down. The courier would destroy any information, and Mizuki would probably K the man and then himself. But why? Ino asked, sitting down as well, stifling a yawn. Once you've been in Hyotoshi, even the minimum security level, you never willingly go back, Anko explained, glancing at the silent Aburame. Hyotoshi is the most dangerous prison in the world. Nobody sane willingly goes back a second time. Seeing Shino finally sit, Anko settled in, knowing without words that she would remain awake as lookout. Mainly because she wasn't sleepy and partly because Anko didn't trust them quite enough to actually sleep. Producing a carton of dango, Anko began munching quietly as the two settled into sleep. Mentally, however, she was far away. She was in the first region, ruled by Governor Bokai, northwest of the center region of Hai no Kuni. It was where Naruto would be heading for, its capital, Keikyoku. He might even already be at the walls of that city, setting about his first mission. Part of her worried about him and wondered if maybe she should have covered him more thoroughly. The other half, though, wasn't worried at all, even with his incomplete crash course. After all, she had trained him. He had the skills for this sort of mission. Plus, he was strong, he didn't need anyone. He was the sort of ninja she approved of. Also, he had training from Jiraiya, possibly the only person Anko could tolerate to take over training Naruto. So, forcing herself not to think any more about Naruto, Anko munched away happily on her dango. Uzumaki Naruto was not used to performing a mission alone, he had no real idea how to go about things. All he had by way of guidance was the scroll from Kakashi and the ability to ask himself what Anko would do. Other than that, he was forced to rely on the lessons Anko had taught him and his own ingenuity. The scroll, for the moment, was the most helpful thing. It had provided a city name and exact details on the amount of samurai along with their patrol patterns, a highly detailed floor plan of both the inner palace and the greater palace, and room locations. It had pretty much done all the hard work for him. All he had to do now was slip in and K the bastard. Naruto, however, was not rushing in due to the fact that he had discovered that the scroll was lacking important information. Namely, the two Hai no Kuni Chunin guarding the city's only entrance. Sitting on the branch of a tree, well out of range, he watched them intently while eating a cup of instant ramen. Stirring his noodles absently, he wondered what Anko would do in this situation. He almost winced, knowing she would K both Chunin and go on her merry way. Sighing, He lifted the noodles to his mouth, contemplating the situation. He had confidence that the scroll was accurate about the palace. After all, he doubted Kakashi would let any ninja go with faulty information. It was the surrounding city and the ninja that were bothering him. He had no clue what was going on there, which meant it would be up to him to figure out how to get around them, create an opening, and strike. Attack when they're not looking, Naruto muttered, scowling at the city. But he couldn't do that unless he had more information on the city itself. He was immediately tempted to create a few hundred clones and send them out, but he remembered Anko's warning. Okay, so, I'll have to do this myself, Naruto said, nodding slightly as he finished his ramen. Pocketing it, he then hopped out of the tree, landing adroitly before stretching. He needed to figure out how many ninja he was dealing with. Pulling off his flak vest, forehead protector, and weapons pouch save for a few kunai he hid them. Sighing, Naruto stretched once more, turning his attention back to slipping into the city itself. Following the road leading to the city, he spotted a slow-moving group where several kids were hanging out. Grinning, he performed a shunshin. When he reached the street, he jogged up to join the group while striking up a conversation with a few of the kids. The two Chunin obviously weren't from Konoha. Most likely, they were those state-trained ninja Tsunade had mentioned. Once past them, without even a second glance, he separated himself from the group and mixed into the crowd. Right, so, now it was time to do as he had so many times in Konoha when he was growing up. It was time to explore, and, shoving his hands in his pockets, he set off. The city actually seemed a lot like Konoha, crowded and filled with semi-rude people as they went about the day. Here and there he could see businesses and street vendors, and over it all he could see the castle on the hill. Shifting directions, Naruto strolled down a side street. It was semi-busy and lined with older buildings and stands. Obviously, it was the old marketplace. Squeezing his way through a small crowd, he bumped into someone and stumbled. Recovering quickly, he looked around. The person in question was an attractive, slightly older maybe 18 blonde girl with cat-like eyes. He also noticed that she had an air very similar to Anko's. She was dangerous, no matter how disarming she looked. Filing her face away for future reference, he gave her a cheeky grin and continued on his way. A few minutes later, he was on yet another side street, with almost no one around, and distracted by the sound of music drifting from a storefront. Following the music, he approached a battered-looking store advertising fortune-telling. Part of him surged with interest. He wouldn't mind having his fortune read. Plus, as he gazed through the window, he could see things for sale. Maybe Anko would like something, or Ino. He hesitated, though, remembering his mission, but, after a moment, he decided that indulging wouldn't be too dangerous. Opening the door, he entered the store. The lights flickered across the surfaces of items, creating an illusion of movement. He almost retreated as a chill swept up his back, then, chuckling at himself, he moved further inside. The walls were lined with shelves of books, and, moving closer, he wondered at the other items. Like the porcelain head that was divided into several dozen different regions, or the porcelain hand whose palm was covered in dark lines. He knew what the crystal ball was, of course. After all, he wasn't a total idiot. Shifting his attention away from those, he studied the books. Some of the les he couldn't understand if he tried. Some he knew were standard fare for such a shop. After all, he was interested in the stories that featured this sort of place. His eyes drifted, then slowed to a stop as they alighted on a necklace. It was laid out on a table, among a dozen others, and yet it was the most interesting one he could see. Two dragons, one black and one white, cleverly combined into a circle. Reaching out with his finger, he briefly skimmed the surface, then promptly screamed as a voice spoke up from behind him. Ah, the Taoist symbol of dark and light, the yin-yang. He turned quickly, worried that anyone other than Anko or another Jonin, anyway, could sneak up on him. What he found was an older woman, gray-haired, slightly stoop-shouldered, dressed in old-fashioned priestess robes. Oh, I'm sorry dear, the old woman said, offering him a pleasant smile. I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Priestess Sagi, seer and reader. Naruto repeated blinking, I didn't mean to, you know. Oh, no. Go ahead dear, Sagi said, moving slowly around him to stare down at the necklace. Each of these bring luck, safety, or good fortune. I have amulets for money, health, love, success, or 1,000 other purposes. Wow. Yes, wow indeed, the old priestess agreed, her long finger running over the necklace he had been studying. I even have omakuji, small pieces of paper that predict your future. However, I believe you are more inclined toward the balance. Picking the yin-yang necklace up, she ran a thumb over the surface before holding it out to him. Take it, dear, I fear it is beyond my ability to sell it to anyone else now. Ha! Naruto repeated blankly as he stared at the necklace, mind caught in the black and white design of dragons. It's free, the woman explained tiredly. The great kami and spirits of this world speak to me and say that you should receive this freely. Not saying anything, Naruto reached out and carefully took the item. The metal was smooth and cool to his touch, soothing in a way. Then, carefully, he slipped it into a pocket. Feeling as if he was released from some spell, he gave the woman a sheepish grin. Well, thanks. Don't thank me, the woman said pleasantly, as Naruto's eyes began darting around before coming to rest on another necklace, a triangular pendant this time. Reaching out, he picked it up, reading the tiny kanji etched into the surface with a grin. Good luck, friendship. Ah, that's a good choice, my dear, Sagi said, reaching out to guide him toward a so far unnoticed table. Shall I tell your fortune while you are here? Ah, sure, Naruto said, allowing himself to be guided to the table. Sitting down, he shifted awkwardly as the old woman settled in across from him and made a few hand gestures. You must believe. Do you believe? Yeah. Sagi paused and stared at him, then raised her hands into the air and closed her eyes. There was a hush in the room, a sudden chill sweeping over Naruto. Then, her body began to tremble before breaking out of her trance. Are you okay? I am fine, the old woman said in an odd voice. Let me see your hand. Nodding nervously, but feeling a creeping of doubt, he offered his hand up. She didn't seem any different or in contact with anything. He watched her run a long, dry finger along his palm, murmuring to herself. Glancing up at him, she raised an eyebrow. Well, Naruto asked in mild impatience. This line represents your romantic relationships, the woman explained as she traced a series of small lines beneath his pinky. Several lines means you'll have several short-term relationships. Deep ones signify marriage. You have 3, 1 deep, 1 medium, and 1 shallow. Right, Naruto managed, just barely keeping from rolling his eyes. He had no romantic relationships. Hell, the closest he had was his former crush on Sakura. This line is your love line, Sagi continued, tracing a medium line from the edge of his hand to the middle of his palm. It says that you can expect an easy love life. Naruto tried not to laugh, which came out as a half snort out ofka. Sagi glared at him and then jabbed at the next line with her fingernail. The headline, the stronger, thicker, longer, and steadier that line is, the smarter and more in control you are. Yours is straight, which means you are not spontaneous or creative. Naruto blinked, thinking about leaving this old woman to her daydreams. Obviously she was a fraud. All Naruto had to do was think about the various things she had told him. He'd have 3 relationships. He'd have an easy love life. He wasn't creative or spontaneous. Pulling his hand away he stood. Look, I gotta get going. You can't leave now, Sagi said firmly, grasping his wrist tightly. Oi, let me go. No, I'm not done with your. Suddenly, Sagi paused, her grip tightening as her body went rigid and her eyes rolled up slowly until only the white showed. A moment later, she collapsed forward, then rose upright once more, her voice now hoarse and ancient. A great calamity, anarchy. A.B. tide. It is coming, I see death, destruction, and despair. Uzumaki Naruto. In the end, trapped between darkness and shadow. You will have to choose. Ha! Darkness and shadow, the woman repeated firmly, her hand suddenly releasing his wrist. Shaken and more than a bit thrown, Naruto hurriedly fished for his money and, leaving far more than he should, bolted from the shop. Ino couldn't help but tap her finger nervously against her thigh, eyeing the surrounding forest uneasily. After setting up the second camp, having just entered Stone Country, Anko had gone on ahead to scout around, while Shino spoke with the local bug life, leaving Ino, who was over alert, on lookout duty. Personally, Ino was more worried about Anko than some idiot who had taught her in the academy. Ino had tried to be nice, had tried to talk with the older woman, but Anko was not easy to get along with. She seemed to view both her and Shino as S-weight, while Ino had decided Anko was just AB. The last several miles had seen both women antagonize each other beyond what was normally tolerated among females. Grumbling, Ino crossed her arms and wondered why she couldn't have been put on this mission with Naruto instead of that crazy woman. At least with him, Ino knew where the boundaries were and what would push his buttons and what wouldn't. Plus, he wasn't likely to S her tea in the middle of the night like Anko was. Glancing a still conversing Shino, Ino considered the woman's parting words about maybe just K them to get it over with. Her tone had been at best curt, and at worst serious. Ino didn't know Anko that well, but what she did know told her just how much stress the older woman was feeling. Which in turn meant that Ino should back off before Anko really did K them. A moment later, she was startled out of her thoughts as a hand covered her mouth and the edge of a kunai pressed against her tea, followed by the soft, taunting voice of Anko whispering in her ear, "Never daydream while being lookout, princess, it gets you and your team K." Ino made a noise of understanding, muscles tight as she waited for the kunai to leave her tea, which it did a moment later, leaving her free to round on the older woman and glare. "What the hell were you thinking? I could have K you." "Sure ya coulda," Anko said with a snort. "If I was some pushover genin, maybe. Just remember, you suck at being lookout." "Oh," Ino drawled sharply, anger flashing through her. "Well, I guess since you're so busy sucking other things, I suppose it's only fair." "Ino," Anko offered in a slightly colder voice. "I would stop now if I were you." "If you were me," Ino said with a disdainful sniff, "my knees would be sore from all the time I spent on them." Anko struck without warning, her hand grasping Ino's shoulder and spinning her around so that Ino's back was against her her hand lifting Ino's chin and the kunai against Ino's jugular. "I'll only say this once, you snotty little bee," Anko said, her voice dropping any hint of humanity. "You keep talking to me like that, and I'll see off those little bumps you call and force feed 'em to you." Hey, Ino started to say, trying to pull herself free. "No, hey, see?" Anko hissed, the kunai pressing harder against her tea. "All you say is, yes, Anko-sama, and then go sit your scrawnier down and pray I don't decide to K you tonight." Ino hesitated, pride screaming not say those words, to fight back. Common sense and fear, however, told her to do as ordered or end up S. "Why yes, Anko-sama," Ino choked out, sick and terrified at the situation she was in. A moment later, she was shoved roughly from behind, away from Anko. Stumbling, Ino turned to stare at the disgusted-looking woman. Reaching up, she carefully touched her tea, alarmed to feel a hint of B there. She wasn't going to S, but from the feel of it, she had a small C. "I've got the watch, princess," Anko said, and this time the word, princess, came out with a note of disgust instead of the usual condescending tone. Ino felt her pride bristle, but saw Shino calmly shake his head in silent warning. Heeding his advice and knowing that her temper had made her provoke Anko, Ino quietly slinked away from the woman and sat down against a tree. Great, just great. She had pissed off the deranged woman that Naruto idolized. Why had she even said any of those rumors? She needed to keep her temper in check better, but Anko grated against her. There was no explanation for it, at least none that Ino could see, but Anko provoked her without even trying. Ino just didn't see why or how Naruto got along with her, because, somehow, she knew Anko had just put her on that private, approved K list, she was always mentioning. Calmly, she didn't know what to do. Taking a deep breath, Naruto slipped toward the mansion in silence, staying hidden within the shadows. A moment later, he used a pair of kunai to climb silently over the wall. Landing on a trench of water, careful to apply just enough chakra to keep from sinking, he darted along it in a low run. Mentally, he reviewed the layout of the estate. He took a breath and, concentrating his chakra, applied his Maisai Gakka no Jutsu. Approaching a wall, he applied chakra to his feet and darted up the vertical surface to land in a crouch. After taking a moment to ensure that he had been unnoticed so far, he moved along the narrow wall in typical ninja style. He paused as he spotted a samurai in the courtyard, then, seeing he was oblivious, Naruto continued on his way. Racing along, he noted a ramp leading to the upper palace, which was his second least favorite option of gaining entry. After several close calls, mostly due to his bad timing, he finally gained access to the compound and the secondary house of the lower area. Slipping inside quietly, he took a moment to catch his breath and then reviewed the map he had memorized. Mostly, all he had done was find the quickest way to do this mission with the least amount of K, hence why he had entered the house instead of trying to take the longer route around the compound and going through the main gate. Setting out once more, he slipped through the empty house, careful to stay near the walls to avoid creaking floorboards, then found the secret passage, a crawlspace that, according to the map, led to a small storage shed in the upper palace. Hoisting himself into the hole headfirst, he pushed himself forward. He slid a considerable way down, then landed on cold, damp earth. Standing, he gave his eyes a moment to adjust to the darkness, then seeing as best as he could, which was just good enough to tell if he was about to be attacked, he set off. He could feel his pulse quickening, a tight ball of nervousness forming in his stomach. Racing along the twisting and turning passage, he was reminded of the Kumo Iki tunnels. Unbidden, half memories flashed before his eyes, but he stomped them down. That was then, this was now. After what felt like forever, the passage began to rise, and Naruto sped up. 5 minutes later, he came to the foot of stone steps, and, careful not to make any noise, he began to climb. 100 steps later, his head thumped softly against a trapdoor. Pausing for a moment, remembering Anko's advice, he listened for any noise. Then, carefully, he pushed the trapdoor open and peered through the crack. He was in a room full of wooden crates and boxes, the storage shed. Naruto climbed out of the trapdoor and replaced it, noting that it blended perfectly with the dusty floor. Moving quietly across the room, he approached the far door, on the doorknob's side. Crouching, he eased it open and peered out into the night. Seeing nothing, he slipped outside. The air was cool, the stars brighter, and he wondered briefly how long had he been in that tunnel. Shrugging it off, he checked his surroundings, then his mental map. Yes, this was the right spot, 4 buildings and a small garden just to the north of him. Slipping quietly along the side of the white-walled buildings, heading for that garden, he tried to remember where the guard that was patrolling the area would be. A second later, he found out as the samurai rounded the corner. Thankfully, since he had his Mesaigaka in place, the samurai didn't see him. Freezing, he allowed the man to pass, then Naruto hurried on his way, rounding the same corner and coming to a stop just in sight of his main target. It was heavily guarded, which wasn't surprising really, but it was going to prove problematic. The main doors had several samurai, and there were 2 separate patrols around the rest of the building. Frowning, Naruto performed a shunshin, slipping a hair's breadth between the 2 patrols. Then, a careful jump brought him to the balcony roof just above the samurai guarding the doors. Peering down at him, he selected a rock he had picked up before setting out for the castle and threw it at the far gate. The racket the samurai down there caused drew the samurai at the main building's entrance. Naruto grinned and, dropping to the ground, quickly slipped inside. So far, so good, Naruto thought, and then quickly pressed himself against the wall and eased forward. In the dim lighting, he spotted the expected guard with a spear, and, beyond him, a wall with a no mask. That was the right path, as per the so far correct scroll. Timing it carefully, he darted past the guard, reached the wall and then headed north once more. Passing through the next door, he turned left, hurried through a room full of sleeping samurai, and came to a sudden halt in the next room. While Naruto was not the sharpest of blades, he did know that even he couldn't slip unnoticed through a room full of alert samurai. There were at least 8, maybe 9 of them, all guarding the stairs he needed to reach the last floor. The scroll hadn't mentioned them. Hell, it hadn't even been hinted at them. Worse yet, Naruto could feel his concentration slipping, which meant his Mesaigaka was close to failing. He didn't have a choice, though, he had to get through this room. Darting into the room, he allowed his Mesaigaka to drop just as the first samurai spotted him. The man reacted swiftly, but Naruto moved with a shunshin, reappearing behind the man while jabbing a kunai into his kidney. Turning, he ducked another samurai's S and came up, driving the kunai up through the man's jaw. Feeling more than seeing an attack from behind, Naruto twisted away from the blow and, with a pivot, rounded on the man and S his T as well. Coming to a stop, he turned to face the other samurai, each of whom was looking frightened, but ready for a fight to the death. Naruto couldn't help but grin and perform another shunshin. Reappearing before the closest samurai, he spun, kicking him across the face. Another shunshin and he reappeared before another one, followed by breaking both knees and then the N. Shunshin and he was in midair, nailing a third unprepared samurai with a spinning heel kick to the temple. Landing, he sensed a samurai charging from the left and threw a kunai without looking, which struck between the man's eyes, and performed another shunshin. This time, he reappeared wrapping his legs around a startled samurai's head, snapping his N before flipping over his now tumbling body. Coming down, he sa foot in the last samurai's face, with a spray of B and a sickening crunch. A moment later, he performed a forward shoulder roll and regained his feet. Heart racing, breathing as if he had just done a light jog around his neighborhood, he turned to take in the S. B was all over the place. The B looked sickening in their unnatural positions. Naruto honestly couldn't decide whether he should feel proud that he had K them all before they had even thought to call out a warning or sick at his actions. Grin gone, he shoved his feelings far behind his mask and then, reapplying his Maisai-gaka, darted up the stairs. Entering the last floor, he paused. He could see a long hallway with a series of doors. The scroll listed those as belonging to the governor's consorts and wives, and the far door belonging to the target. Creeping into the hallway, he drew within a few steps of the room and then stopped, just barely hearing the noise of two people talking inside the room. At the noise of a voice growing louder, he eased himself back. A moment later, the door opened, and a young woman in a kimono stepped out of the room. Bonso Aru Bokai-sama, the girl said softly, then, kneeling, set a tray aside and began to slide the door close. With a split-second decision, Naruto performed a shunshin to enter the room. Coming to a stop, he held his breath, ensuring his camouflage was still in place, then looked around the room. It was actually a very basic room, but it was definitely a governor's chamber. Seeing that the only people present were him and the governor, who was just now laying down, he relaxed slightly. He waited for what felt like forever, then, finally satisfied that the man was asleep, he slipped a kunai from where he had it strapped and crept forward. Coming to a stop beside the futon, he flipped the kunai around, then stared down at the older man, his pot belly and his large nose. He was here, he'd pulled it off. Slipped past who knew how many samurai, at least 2 chunin, slipped into a highly secure room, and was now crouched over the bed of a traitor. The governor snorted in his sleep, then rolled onto his back and smacked his lips, murmuring a name. Naruto allowed his Maisai-gaka to drop once more and reached out, covering the man's mouth. Bokai's eyes snapped open in a panic, but it was too late. Naruto had driven his kunai into the man's jugular. There was a spasm as Bokai jerked, a spray and gargle of B, and then the man was still, eyes glassy. Naruto waited another minute to ensure his death, then silently removed the kunai and wiped it emotionlessly on the body's blanket. Blade clean, he placed it back in its holding place, then reapplied his Maisai-gaka. Turning, he hurriedly slid the door open, then closed it behind him. Mission complete. Niyugito reclined comfortably in the hot water of her bath, dozing as a cat might. The heat had long since seeped into her taut muscles, coaxing her toward a deeper sleep. She might indeed have slept through the night in the bath, save that she kept being pulled back every so often by a sudden flare of chakra. Or, at least, she dreamily thought it was chakra, because whenever she focused on it she felt nothing. Yawning, she came out of her nap and stretched, luxuriating in the sensation. Sitting up completely, she looked around with a slight frown. That had definitely been chakra, and the largest spike yet. Muttering to herself, the Kumo Jonin climbed out of the bath and slipped a cotton robe over her athletic frame. Leaving the steam-filled room, she stepped into the cooler dressing area and paused, feeling another spike of chakra. Eyes narrowing, she quietly shed her robe and pulled on her pants, then rewrapped her arms in gauze before pulling on her shirt with the built-in Dumaru specially designed by her village to withstand and absorb most jutsu, then quickly retied her long blonde hair back into her signature ponytail. Finished with that, she grabbed her fingerless gloves and cloud forehead protector, while marching out the door. Stopping, she glanced around the village, then at the castle a short walk away from the inn where Bokai had insisted she stay. Cat-like eyes narrowing once more, she headed that way, wondering why she no longer felt any spikes of chakra. Reaching the gate, she was confronted, of course, by samurai. Aha, Nisama. What are you doing back here so late? The one on the left asked, sounding uneasy. I felt someone using chakra, Yugito explained, pocketing her lightning forehead protector. After all, these idiots thought she was from Konoha, like Bokai had told them. Well, Raizen-san did just come in a few minutes ago to check up on things, the samurai explained with a shrug. Maybe he was using chakra. I don't think, Yugito started to argue, until she was set off by the alarm bell. Looking up sharply, she felt a chill sweep through her. If you'll excuse me, Captain. She forced her way past the startled samurai. The lower palace was full of samurai running around in confusion. Weaving her way easily through them, she reached the upper palace and was unsurprised to find a much more military reaction. These samurai had a hard, vicious look about them, and, even though they knew her, they watched her intently. Entering the main building, she was greeted with even more intense samurai, some with them in their eyes. Moving swiftly, she passed patrols that were searching the rooms thoroughly, then reached the room that connected the second floor to the first. What she found suddenly made it clear why the samurai up here were covered with so much intent. Soaked the floor and walls, the source of which were the 9S samurai littering the floor in various unnatural positions. Whoever had taken them out had done so quickly and silently, judging by the fact that they were all clumped together, which told Yugito that they had been using shunshin. So that was the flickering chakra she had felt. Frowning, she navigated the B and approached the stairs, where she found a local chunin she vaguely remembered being named Ginger, pinned to the wall by a kunai through the T. That was vicious, cold B, it reminded her of the stories about that Anko woman. Whoever had done this had been AK, pure and simple. Continuing on, she reached the second floor, where she found the consorts and wives weeping openly and the far door flung open. Moving past the women, she entered the room and found Raizen kneeling over the body of Bokai, his face stony. Where the hell were you? Yugito ignored his question and moved to the other side of the bed, kneeling. A jugular S while the man was still in bed. A cold K and an experienced A, could it have been that Anko? Reaching out to cover his eyes with her hand, Yugito's wrist was grabbed by the last chunin. I said, where were you, Nisama? Raizen sneered. Looking up, Yugito met his gaze calmly. Then, lifting her other hand, she extended a finger and touched his lips. SSSH, within the space of a few seconds, his lips turned black, F turned chalk white, and he collapsed, S. Turning back to the only body that mattered, she sighed. Closing her eyes, Yugito concentrated on tapping just a fraction of the Nekomata's power. Her Shikyo Juke was one of only 2 reasons she was given the Jonin rank. The other was her Onijutsu Shikyo Taki, which belonged exclusively to her as the Jinchuriki of the Nekomata. Feeling the tainted chakra flow into her hand, she activated the Beiyu-aided ability of Shikyo Juke, replaying the last few minutes of the man's life. It came slowly, black and white, jumpy and scratchy, but it played out before her. His last K, then his falling asleep, then his eyes snapping open. Here things became blurry, but she paused at the darkened image of his attacker. Dark chakra concentrated, forcing the image to clear for her, burning out the body's optic nerves. A minute later, Yugito had the image of the A, and a jolt ran through her, she knew him. He had been the kid that had bumped into her in the village earlier that day. She had marked him off as nothing more than some random kid, at most from a local martial arts school, but he had been a trained A. Breaking the connection, she hissed in frustration and stood. Not only had he gotten past the chunin guarding the gates and through who knew how many samurai, he had gotten past her. She had told her superiors that she could handle this mission, that she could get Bokai back to them safely. She knew how important a defected Hi-no Kuni governor as powerful as Bokai could have been for lightning. She had failed. Then another part of her mind spoke up, and it said firmly that this boy must S. He had to pay for this atrocity, needed to pay because she was a Jonin, and she would do anything prove she deserved that rank. That even though all she had was her, Onijutsu, and the basics from the academy, she deserved to be treated equal to any other Jonin. Eyes narrowed, the young woman nodded and then forcefully marched out of the room. She knew the quickest and most secure path away from the castle, that would be where this boy was heading. Naruto knew he was being chased. How he knew that, he wasn't entirely sure. All he knew was that he had someone chasing him, and they weren't about to back off. 10 minutes ago, he had cleared the village, retrieved his various hidden items, and set out for Konoha. Somewhere along the way, he had picked someone up, and they weren't backing off. Swearing to himself, he channeled chakra into his legs and put on a burst of speed, weaving his way through the forest he had darted into. The faster he went, the harder it became to keep up with the trees and roots. He could hear the soft sound of branches swaying, the stray sound of leaves rustling behind him. Glancing over his shoulder, he frowned at the silhouette of his pursuer, then, cursing, performed a series of shunshuns, trying to gain ground. It seemed futile, however. Whoever it was behind him was fast enough to keep up with him. It looked like his only option would be to stand and fight. Then, as he came to that decision, he was forced to leap backward to avoid an exploding kunai as it whistled from behind him and crashed into the tree in front. Landing, he dodged to the left, just as his enemy sped past him. As the dirt and smoke cleared, he discovered his attacker. She was lithe, with long blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail and blue cat-like eyes. Her shirt was made up of the upper part of a black shirt and some sort of flexible white armor that was wrapped around her torso. He noted the bandages that wound their way up her exposed arms and the fingerless gloves. For some reason, he knew instinctively that, unlike Ino, who wore them for fashion, there was a reason for this woman to be wearing those bandages. Shifting his weight silently, Naruto wondered what was going on and where she was from. Her forehead protector sported what looked like clouds, and, while he knew that meant she was from a foreign village, he couldn't guess which. Talk about annoying, he wasn't even sure what the hell to expect now. Oi, who the hell are you? Ni Yugito, the woman said curtly, crouching slightly. I'm the third strongest shinobi in Kumo. Wait a minute, you were that girl. Naruto said, in surprise. So, he had been right, she was more than she appeared. Yes. And you're the poor bastard that I have to K now, Yugito hissed, pouncing with cat-like grace and speed. Swearing, Naruto began forming the Rasengan, then ducked as her hand made a swipe at his face, the incomplete sphere of chakra into her stomach. The result was still impressive. There was a loud crack from her armor and then she was forced off her feet and sent spinning back into the tree. There was another cracking noise, and she slumped to the ground in a heap, which left Naruto blinking in surprise. Damn, that was pretty B to see. Walking toward her slowly, he cautiously stopped just out of her reach. He wasn't that trusting, after all, sparring with Anko had taught him a lot. A moment later, he moved back as she surged up from the ground, her cat-like eyes glowing a dark purplish black. A moment later, her hand wrapped around his wrist and yanked him into the air, before him back into the ground. His body felt like it was like he was going numb and cold at the same time. As Yugito lifted him once more, he weakly tried to lift his head, but his vision was blurring. She looked so odd now, but if he focused, he could make her out clear as day. Relaxing her hand, Yugito dropped the now limp body to the ground. You're a Chunin. Why'd they send a Chunin? I mean, I know Konoha might be a bit strained after the Chunin exam Fyakuzo and the Uchiha incident. But a Chunin. Coughing, Naruto felt his body recovering, and he slowly rolled over onto his hands and knees, then pushed himself upright. How? Yugito murmured, taking an instinctive step back. They sent me, Naruto managed in a slightly strangled voice, then looked at her, surprised at how clear and sharp she appeared, because I'm the future Hokage. Who the hell are you? Yugito asked, staring him. Uzumaki Naruto. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.